Thanks, Garrison. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to part of this conversation and present to you this set of work among the investment cases that RTI has been working on, led by Rachel Nugent. And I'm Yemi Okunogbe. I'm a health policy analyst at RTI. So this work is focused on NTDs. Looking at an example in Ghana is a toolkit. Was commissioned by UNDP together with United Effort Partners, shown here, and the WHO. Next slide, please. And so the objective of the project was essentially to create a user-friendly investment case tool that country managers, analysts can use to understand the returns on investment for particular entity interventions. And to start with, in terms of scope, was to begin with an initial NTD investment case, looking at some specific subset of diseases and interventions for a prototype country, and then expand that to other countries. So for this phase of the project, we looked at 3 NTDs: lymphatic filariasis, onchocerciasis, and leprosy, and used Ghana as a prototype based on consultations with partners and different countries that were interested, and also focused on 5 specific interventions across these 3 diseases. The outputs were a literature review report, an Excel-based investment case tool supposed to be that is user-friendly and can be adapted to other countries for the same set of diseases and interventions. A user guide to help anyone that wants to use the tool to navigate through the tool, an extensive detailed technical methods document, and then a PowerPoint that summarizes our finding. So in terms of current status, we started this project officially in February, so it's been about 8 months of developing this model. And we submitted the draft product in November, got comments November, December, and then submitted the final product just earlier this month. Currently, internal testing is underway at UNDP and WHO, and we are looking forward to resource mobilization and pilot testing that will happen in phase 2, and then also adapting the tool to other countries and expanding its use. Next slide, please. And so in terms of methodology, just the steps that we walk through, and also similar to what others have done that has been shown on the call already. We'll start with the scoping literature review to just look at the health and economic burden of NTDs, specifically in Ghana, and also to identify distinct and cost-effective interventions that we can use in the model. And then the next step to that is to we look at different data sources. So peer review literature from our scoping literature review, looked at global databases where there were deficiencies in evidence from the peer review literature, and also relied on expert opinions from Ministry of Health, Ghana Health Service, our NTD experts at WHO, and also at RTI. The modeling is in 2 parts. We have an epidemiologic model, which we use to forecast the prevalence of these 3 NTDs from 2020 to 2050, and also look at what happens with each intervention, how that changes the projected prevalences using some regression-based approach. And also the economic model, the standard benefit cost analysis, return on investment analysis, looking at looking at the cost of each intervention, the impact of the intervention on mortality and morbidity, and then kind of estimating the economic returns. So both the benefit cost ratios and return on investment for each of these interventions, and then also looking at them individually and also as a package. We look at this from a societal perspective. So we look also at not only at the healthcare costs that are prevented, but also had productivity gains from absenteeism and reduced absenteeism and presenteeism, and also reduced prevented mortality. Next slide, please. And so in terms of lessons learned, the development process of the toolkit was a really collaborative process that incorporated the perspective of the various stakeholders. And this is really very useful, as others have already said, in developing this to get buy-in to ensure that you reflect what is already known and what is out there and different priorities. A lesson learned from that, and I think that somebody also mentioned that previously, is that just anticipating the time needed to incorporate these perspectives, to get approval and validation. We're also trying to use country source data as much as possible, and that takes some time. So just building that in into your calculation in terms of projecting the time to take to develop the model. Also, another lesson that we're learning is around just the challenges around creating a tool for multi-country use. As I said, the goal is to allow this tool to be applicable to other countries, easily replicable. And that has challenges because you have to, because of the trade-offs between wanting to have a detailed model and rigor, and also when you have to apply that to practitioners that will actually use that on the tool. And for example, multi-sectoral interventions are something that are very important in NTDs. Interventions cuts across not just health, education. So trying to bring in that rigor at the same time, also making it applicable and also generalizable across countries, while also going deeply enough into each country-specific country context is also really something you have to learn. We are learning to navigate. Also resolving and working around data and evidence gaps. Of course, we all know, especially for the entities, our lit review showed that there's just a limited data and evidence around, for example, for Ghana, we found really limited data around the economic burden of entities in Ghana specifically. And for some interventions, there is more, for example, around MDAs and PCTs, for example, whereas there's less evidence around other things. For example, leprosy and other things. So just working around those data and evidence gaps, where do you go for the country source data? Where do you approximate to the regional data? All things that we need to work around. Lastly is around just the gap between global goals and model reality. So for example, a country might say we want to understand what happens in a particular district. And so just figuring out how to, train the model and train your tool to go from national to just the regional or district level is also something we are learning and it's a work in progress. In terms of next steps is to pilot test the tool in select countries and also to include more countries, more NTDs. There are over 20 NTDs, neglected tropical diseases. And so there's just a wide range and also very different interventions too across. And so including that in the tool is the next step, and also different interventions. And also the 1L2 currently does not have an impact module for NTDs. It has costs, program cost and intervention coverage and system cost. And so just thinking what we are doing now in terms of the impact of these interventions and then the return on investment and cost benefits, thinking that with the 1L2 will also be another thing to think about in the future. Thank you all for listening and look forward to further conversation on this. I'm going to turn it over to the next slide, Christina.